For our book presentation, like the email kind of stated, we're going to guide you through several videos that kind of describe our book and some activities connected to our book. So the way it's set up, after each video is done, the next one should start right away. If not, you have access to that playlist. You can see all the videos. You're just watching them in order. So we'll start diving in. Our book was Culturally Responsive Teaching by Geneva Gay. This is Professor Gay, and she is a professor of education at the University of Washington, Seattle, and she teaches multicultural ed and general curriculum theory there. This book came out in 2000 and really explores a lot of big things happening in culturally responsive teaching and practices, especially during the 90s, and is kind of wrapping all those things together, and is a really foundational book coming out about things that weren't really happening in education. The way the book was broken down, there was 8 chapters. Because we in our class have done so much with culturally responsive teaching, practices, pedagogy, stuff like that, as we're sitting down and figuring out what we want to talk through in this module, we said that we can cut out a lot of these chapters and don't need to spend time talking about it because we've done so much of them. So as we tackle it, chapter 1 was challenges and perspectives. That throughout the entire course of our 2 years have been coming to understand about the challenges and perspectives of culturally responsive teaching and practices and why we should be forcing this. We don't need to talk about it here. Next one was the power pedagogy through culturally responsive practices. Again, with all of our constructivist theories, with meeting with all of the people around of our resources in La Crosse, we don't need to talk through power pedagogy. The power of caring, don't need to talk about it. That's a whole idea about building relationships. Every single guest speaker we've ever spoken to has just emphasized that. Build a connection with kids and power is going to happen. So we don't need to talk about caring. Culture and communication in the classroom, that one is something that popped out to us. We really haven't talked about language a lot. We've talked about how to reflect cultures in classrooms, but really haven't talked about language. So we are going to spend a lot of time talking about chapter 4 in this module. But then as we started flying through the rest of this stuff, ethnic and cultural diversity, we know that there's going to be kids of different backgrounds coming to our classroom. That for this module, don't need to talk about it. Cultural congruity in teaching and learning, making sure that your curriculum is set up to reflect different perspectives, different ideas, different stories of how things are perceived. And then this chapter 7 was a case study, so we weren't going to dive into a ton of this case study. Really interesting stuff and really kind of fascinating things to hear about, but not really anything for our purpose because we've heard it before, and then we're not going to only dive into the epilogue. So our focus for today is going to be solely on chapter 4, culture and communication within the classroom. So the videos that you're going to watch are going to start diving into more specifically African American language and bridging a gap between African American language and general American English. And so the series of videos that you're going to watch are relating to some different topics about code switching and being able to allow students to be able to keep things that they have in terms of language roots and language cultures, but also being able to be successful in terms of classroom studies. So we're going to dive into some things about communication and hope you enjoy the videos. The first video that we're going to give is going to be just an introduction into the linguistic structures of African American Vernacular English, and they'll refer to that as AAVE, or African American Vernacular English. Other things I've heard is called African American Language. So there could be a lot of things that are used to kind of represent that dialect, and then they're going to kind of compare those to general American English or mainstream American English. And this is just the language of professionalism, the language of schools, the language of jobs, the language of universities, of academia. So general American English or mainstream American English, and how that bridges with African American Vernacular English. So hope you enjoy the video. Good luck.